My father first talked to me about it fairly early. He said, "What do you think of Thundercats?" And I said, "Thundercats? What is a Thundercat?" And the first thing I remember him telling me was, I had this idea for a series that involved superhumans that had the form of cats, what parts of them were going to be animal, what parts of them were going to be human. And he would put that down when he pitched it. And it was kind of like I say, Thundercats, Thundercats, Thundercats. And after a while, it really started saying, yeah.
Rankin Bass was an animation studio that had pioneered stop-motion animation for television. They became kind of the masters of that. And then they diversified. They got into doing cell animation as well.
At that time in the Rankin Bass career, we had just formed an affiliation with Telepictures. And their strong point, and the reason they wanted us and we wanted them, is they had a great sales force.
So Arthur and Jules developed a relationship with them, and in the process of developing other shows, we were being pitched ideas by Leisure Concepts, Inc., this design firm. They would come up with ideas and present them, and I remember Stan Weston came up, and I forget exactly what he was pitching to us, but I obviously wasn't too interested in that. I looked over at his portfolio, and there was this design in there of this half cat, half human thing. It was just this incredible piece of artwork. And so I sort of wandered over and took it out of his portfolio. I remember Jules looking at it, and you could just see his mind just off to the races. In New York at the time, Rankin Bass was the only animation company. So we didn't have a pool of writers or illustrators that worked specifically for animation.
They got to use a lot of people who didn't work on the regular Hollywood cartoons. They got people like Leonard Starr, who was a great cartoonist, a newspaper cartoonist, and they've also got people like Howard Post and Bob Haney, who had written comic books for DC. Thundercats was done with an American comic book sensibility, and it really comes through with the kind of stories and the imagination on that show.
Jules called me and asked if I could come in to Rankin Bass's office. Everybody was gone. Jules was there alone, and he had an easel set up with some posters of cat people. There was the Panther Man and the Tiger Man, that sort of thing. There was also, what turned out to be the Thunder Tank. The best thing about it was the logo, the lettering on the logo was just sensational. So he said, "Can you do a treatment?" So I said, when do you want it? And he says, "Tomorrow." And that's what I did. It was a 12-page treatment, the entire thing, the exodus from Thundera, the dying planet, and being attacked by the mutants.
Jules, in the very beginning, said to me, what you have to understand about animation is that whatever you can imagine, whatever you want, you can do. You just have to write it.
We were a bunch of guys sitting around a conference room table saying, okay, well, they're in this new place called Third Earth. They're going to have to move around. We got to have this thing called a Thunder Tank. And then, okay, well, they can't just go to the gas station, so we have to invent this thing called Thundrillium that the Thunder Tank runs on, and they can't find it.
So what you must do is open your mind to anything. So it never occurred to me that, we couldn't have an Egyptian character with a spaceship. Why couldn't we have thunder tanks? As long as you could somehow fit it within that format.
Just getting everyone around the conference table for 2-3 long day sessions and just kicking ideas around.
Thundercats, ho!
I had Thundercats Ho, and Jules added the thunder building on it. You could accelerate it, thunder. It's musical. That was good. Jules had a touch for that.
It was collective. It was. But I must say, Jules Bass was running the collective.
The vision of the show that Jules had was a very clear, clean action-adventure show with a very clearly defined comedy element. I think he had very clear visions for each of the characters and very clear roles for young kids like Wile E. Cat and Wile E. Kid.
First light.
I remember there was no question there was going to be a good guy girl, and so we created Chitara. And of course there were a lot of jokes to me. At first they didn't want to give her a weapon. They wanted to put her in the Lair's kitchen, and thank God they were joking.
She tried to make Chitara, a strong female presence on the show, and of course most of the writers were male and respond very well to that. Oh, you gave her a stick. What else do you want?
Oh, I loved Chitara. I think I identify with her. I just loved her strength. I loved the fact that she was strong. It was partially physical, but partially was her speed.
Chitara was just fast, you know. I mean, her whole point was speed. And Panthers was strength, and Tigra's was integrity and sort of leadership, and Lion-O was a learning experience. He's just learning to be a superhero throughout the things.
I think the idea was to give the audience a model, somebody that the audience could identify with, like an older brother who has to go through the process of growing up.
Ancient spirits of evil, transform this decayed form to mumm-ra.
He just was a bad guy that got mummified, possibly a bad high priest, but there was no backstory. He was just there as a villain. I named him mumm-ra, and he was evil, and it was very much like the Boris Karloff mummy, you know, walking around like that. But Jules made him the monster. And there was a lot of transformation going on at that time. You know, cars would turn into big robots and that sort of thing. And so transformation seemed like a good idea.
There had been many parents groups that had been campaigning against cartoons on television. They were considered too violent for kids.
The Thundercats, we had another idea, which had not been done then. And with all of the action going on, there was always a moral to the story that was, if you will, sugar-coated and hidden in there for kids to observe. And we had Robert Cusis, a child psychologist, who advised us on that.
Children's TV is going to go on. If we're going to produce it, let's bring someone on and who's going to do something positive for kids. My job as a consultant was really to review scripts to make sure that the content was not going to be harmful. And then the idea emerged to write morals.
He would look at our outlines. He would then decide, okay, this story is definitely going to adapt itself very well to lessons in responsibility. And we would then meet with the writer and discuss on the second draft how we could expand that.
I let him get to me, and until I can control that, I've got a long way to go.
Lion-O and his development is something kids could identify with, the fact that he was learning just as they're learning. And then I think of Jaga, the wise old man who was a parent figure, someone he could rely on to go to seek wisdom.
You've always been my guide and teacher, Jaga, and my friend.
I think that gave children then watching it a sense of safety, that there were elders in their life, so to speak, that they could rely on their wisdom to learn.
I wish he'd joined us in our struggle to spread the code of Thundera. Justice,
Truth,
honor,
and loyalty.
We thought all of our shows had good guidance and advice for our audience, and especially young children. In everything we did, we tried to show that this is the way to grow up and become a real person. But the message never dominated the storytelling itself. And yes, it was good for the stations to be able to point out that they were doing public service work along with their adventure programming.
Sword of Omens, come to my hand. Sword of Omens, come to my hand.
those volcanic eruptions are creating a magnetic field
that's destroying our communications. What are we going to do, Lion-O? Shall we have children?
We had the freedom to create these characters any way the director would let us, basically, and do whatever sounds and give whatever expression we could.
And Lee Donecker was in charge of all of the actors and directed and produced most of the voice recordings. And we created this stock company of a dozen actors that would come and do their parts on a regular basis.
Larry Kinney was one of our first hires as Lion-O. There was just no question. He could be the American superhero.
The first thing I thought to myself was, I don't want to play him like a superhero, because that's the first thing, I'm Lion-O, and you're. But they kept saying to me, well, we want a strong superhero voice. So I just basically tried to make him vulnerable and yet strong,
Lion-O was the youngster And so it was somewhat about the more mature characters like Tigra giving him guidance as we went. We had to settle on how these characters not only were going to sound, but what their attitudes were going to be. I wanted Tigra to be a real guy, a man's man. And so he would help Lion-O develop into maturity. So, and sometimes when I listen to Tigra, I say, boy, this is a square dude, kind of, you know?
Panthro was my favorite character in the show, and Earl Hyman voiced him. He had a delicious multi-level quality. Of his voice was very beautiful and melodious and rich.
You are a genius.
I am?
The ventilation shaft, Snarf. You could squeeze through to the sword chamber.
Earl Hyman is a fine Shakespearean actor. He speaks several Scandinavian languages and made a long career playing Othello in Scandinavia.
Hadn't you better slither back to your castle, Plundar, mutant?
Lynn Lipton in the studio helped in creating her voice. I think hit just the right pitch.
She had to have a voice that was feminine, though strong enough to carry Lion-O.
So you had to pitch her, you know, we are going to do this, Lion-O.
And, you know, you had to pitch her so that she had such a remarkable sense of strength and yet motherly. And some of the guys have said to me that I was their fantasy growing up. And I mean, I'm kind of flattered.
Now, mumm-ra is this 80-foot tall guy, and remember that mucus coming out of his mouth and stuff? That was Earl. It wasn't mucus, but whenever he had to do the line, ancient spirits of evil, transform this decayed form into, and then we'd all back away in the corner, mumm-ra! It'd be all over the room.
I don't know if anybody expected Earl to come up with the mumm-ra he created. It was so outrageous. Sometimes we just stand and watch him do these speeches, and he'd go into the fiendish laugh, and we just applaud. We just applaud after it was finished.
Whoever you are, I'd let me go if I were you. I'm a Thundercat.
Bob McFadden, he was Snarf. He created this wonderful sound for it.
Snarf, snarf. Are you guys gonna take this?
If you could see his face when he was doing it, he was Snarf. I mean, he became Snarf.
Bob McFadden was crazy. I mean, the characters that would come out of him, he was like a Robin Williams. He could do 50 characters, and he'd do it within 3 minutes. He had this architecture in his brain, this ability to create these characters and spit them out at you, and it was like this magic laboratory in there.
We all played many, many characters. Each of us played at least 2 or 3 of the main characters. So we would audition for that in the studio as we were recording the episode. You know, we'd say, okay, guys, who wants to audition for him? We'd hold our hands up, and you'd read a couple of lines.
You are doomed, Thundercat. This time we've got you.
Jackalman, when he did that voice, we all just, yes, oh, master, yeah. It was terrific. It was great. And I'm happy to say, when I did Monkey, and everybody kind of just said, yeah, that's the voice.
Lion-O, your time has come.
I remember several times when Lion-O would have confrontations with Jackalman, both of whom I voiced. I always preferred just to do them real time. For example, if Lion-O was sitting there, you know, contemplating, and he heard,
Well, Lion-O, I see you're here alone.
Jackalman, how did you...
Never mind how I got in. Where are the other Thundercats?
Don't worry about it.
I should have known the Territor didn't mean us any harm when the Sword of Omens didn't obey me. And anyway, it was just plain stupid to assume it might be bad. Just what am I talking about?
Any kind of recording session, you're going to have outtakes. People saying, oh, poo-poo, I messed up a word. And the engineers always save it, and they play it for their friends at parties and stuff.
Oh, Lion-O, we're not...
What's the matter, Snarf?
I got a cold.
Okay, you can hear me saying,
Thunder! 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 Thundercats! I'm going too high.
and then there's one where I go, anyway, we've got to find the mumm-ra's cave and take the samoflange and put it... What the samoflange?
They would go off the script all the time, or they'd just make mistakes, and it's funny to hear Lion-O goof up. It was very hard to keep from laughing when an actor is doing that thing, must reach the boulder that's kind of strained, got to lift. which was in the script all the time.
Chitara, Panthro, my leg, I can't move. Every episode, something was wrong with his leg.
And when you watch another human being doing that, it's very hard to keep from laughing. He was terrific at it.
We played hard in the studio, but we worked hard as well. When I said, okay, page 28, let's do it again, they were back up to that mic, giving the performance of their lives each and every half hour. We did become a family, and there were birthdays, and there were marriages, and there were babies, and we all went through them together.
The main characters and the main mutants were all set in stone. And so they needed me to do character design for the new, the guest stars that would come in, and the ships and the crafts and the weird, monstery little Third Earth spiders. Mumm-ra was the first character I designed. And I worked all day on Mumm-ra, and they really liked it, and it was good. I often would just go with whatever picture came to mind right away, and then let someone else go, no. The horns don't come out of his lower lip, they're out of the top of his head. I think the writers would come up dry sometimes, and they would, to try to create a Third Earth character or an animal, and they'd go a llama with a duckbill, and they'd an octopus with a duckbill. The duckbill was like this thing that was like a magic bullet. And so one day I created a duck-billed samurai who was this really mean-looking Japanese imperial warrior with this big duckbill on him. That never made it in the show.
They would write the scripts, do the voice tracks in the US, and then they would send it to Japan for animation. The Japanese studio did the finished animation, the cells, the backgrounds, and all that. The thing with Rankin and Bass was they made very early ties with Japanese animation studios. They did it first. They just knew that there was a lot of talent in that country that could produce this animation.
Arthur was the one that worked more closely with the designers and basically helped Masaki Iizuka for Thundercats create his studio, which was really, we joked, it was Rankin Bass East a lot of the time.
Pacific Animation Corporation was what he formed, and we used them in our animation process. They're very talented people, and we always welcome suggestions from everyone in our group. And as you know, no film is made by one person. Everyone has some input.
So we depended a lot on Pacific Animation Corp to carry the ball. And of course, you can't tell from a drawing the way people walk. They did all that. They created all that. They brought them to life, basically.
The style of animation was beautifully Japanese. I mean, it was anime, and it was even before the American audience fell in love with anime.
Thundercats, as a US-based animation series, was completely different looking from the other adventure animation shows that were on at the time, and mainly because it was animated in Japan. And you can tell the Japanese had their own unique style. There's a lot of movement, animation of mechanical objects, the style of the background art, something almost like an abstract piece of Jackson Pollock art. Something like Thundercats was a real revelation to a lot of fans. When they saw it, it was like, oh, this is cool. It's like a hybrid. And it really is the very, very beginning of anime and its acceptance in this country.
From the time we saw one of the first designs and thought, this is the show we want to develop, in 10 months we had a 1-hour special called Exodus.
They began running in the fall. And we were still recording when the word came back that it's a hit. It's a hit. I'm sure the thought crossed my mind, that means we'll do more, doesn't it?
We became the #1 show of its time. And being such a great success, there was a traveling road show of Thundercats. And they wore the costumes and so forth. And one of the symbols of Thundercats, of course, is the sword. And in Madison Square Garden, they had little kids, We're all in to see this show. And at one point, of course, there is, Thundercats, 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 ho! And all these swords lit up. I've never ceased to be impressed by the power of that medium.
I became aware of how big a hit it was going to be when I went to Toys R Us to get something. And they had installed an entire row of Thundercats stuff. I'm walking down the aisle thinking, thank goodness it's a voiceover job where they can't recognize me, or else all these kids would be, idolizing me and, wanting my autograph and stuff. Anyway, this one kid says, I'm going to get the Jackalman. What are you going to get? And he says, I'm going to get the mumm-ra. I couldn't help myself. I said, Why don't you get Lion-O? He comes with a sword of omens. Come to my hand. I walk away and the kid says, he doesn't even sound like Lion-O. And I'm laughing, I'm thinking, if you only knew, kid, you know?
Wow, Thundercats, I mean, it was just right thing at the right time. Everything just was working together behind the scenes and then on the screen. And for some reason, that just ended up magic and set us apart.
We just made what we had to make, you know, thinking they would be good and not knowing the longevity of anything. Why do certain pictures last so long and others come and go and fade? I don't think any of us know the answer to that. I guess we must have felt the pulse then, and it's still continuing.
It's a little embarrassing, but thanks for watching Thundercats.
Thundercats fans, from all of us who did the show, thank you for being such great fans and for enjoying what we did, being appreciative of what we did. Thunder, 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 Thundercats!